Having deaf parents, I was enriched and blessed, living in a deaf world as a hearing person who can hear. As the oldest in my family, I had high expectations and responsibilities that my other peers did not have. I was conflicted and stuck in between two worlds, the deaf and hearing world. Growing up, I didn't fit in either. I was always feeling deaf, but the problem was I was hearing. I never felt like I matched in the hearing world, but I made myself fit in. Later in life, I learned I was not deaf nor hearing. I found my identity. I was a true CODA, a child of deaf adult. A CODA's first language is typically American Sign Language, in which I take pride in, as well as I embrace our deaf culture. I was fortunate to live in two unique, beautiful worlds, the deaf and the island world. It's where I felt and I belonged. I have experienced struggles with the deaf, living in a big hearing world, and I wanted to make an impact and help make a change. As the years passed, I saw a need for deaf awareness, empowerment, and advocacy. I immersed myself into being a servant to advocate and bring equal access and awareness to my deaf community. Being a servant to social change began with connecting and being a leader and teaching. A lifetime of leadership, struggles, and being different. I began my bridge believing in important cultural values and education. My outreach began in 1999 when I coached cheerleading at the Washington State School for the Deaf. Deaf students learned that I was a professional Polynesian dancer and wanted to understand and learn the stories of cultural songs and dance. My deaf mother and my deaf aunt learned to dance hula while they went to school at the Hawaii School for the Deaf. I knew it was possible, and I was excited to see how I was able to bring it to the mainland. I began to teach the deaf students dances and stories of Polynesia. Eventually, I taught them a full Polynesian show to where we had the idea to do a fundraiser. We invited the local hearing and deaf community to our first ever Deaf Polynesian Luau. During that time, I was the president, choreographer, and teacher of the Kekukui Foundation. We began to incorporate dancers into our show who can sign and added interpreters at our annual luau. Approximately 70 deaf individuals attended our yearly event. Shortly after, I branched off and established Aloha Productions Polynesian Review. We offered a full Polynesian show, but what made it unique is that we offered, upon request, a show in ASL and performed throughout the Northwest. We brought smiles to deaf events such as weddings and social gatherings and so much more. We reached out to Chestnut Lane, a deaf senior living facility, and we did a show for our deaf senior citizens. In order for them to feel the music, we brought balloons for the deaf so they can hold them and feel the music, as well as had several dancers sign and dance the numbers. Beginning in 1999 until 2009, I ran summer camps with over 140 participants, ranging from the age of 4 to 12 years old, deaf, hearing, and those with special needs. We also employed deaf workers too. Our camp was known as Deaf Friendly. Deaf and hearing families drove from surrounding towns to bring their children to the specific camp. Interpreters, sign staff, and all the children provided each other with communication and equal access. Hearing children were exposed and integrated with deaf children and staff, and the integration created friendships, and it broke the barriers of judgments that would normally occur without such integration. We taught the hearing to sign and allowed deaf children become leaders and teachers. The bridge I was building began with empowering and creating leaders of deaf children. Throughout these experiences, I worked as an educational and video relay interpreter. I began to understand the importance of deaf education and having qualified, skilled teachers and interpreters for the deaf, and how crucial using ASL as a target language is beneficial for deaf to be successful. In order to break the ground and branch this concept out into the world, I started with an idea. In the year 2000, my first outreach project into the hearing world was Deaf Awareness, a school-wide assembly consisting of over 3,000 audience members. The school had a deaf ed program and approximately 13 deaf students, and I wanted to help make a change and create opportunities for the deaf students. Hearing students and staff became intrigued, and I began to educate the hearing community by teaching deaf culture, the deaf world, and American Sign Language. Shortly after, the hearing students and staff learned basic ASL, and the deaf ed students gained friends by the hundreds. This exposure and interest throughout the community had brought forth deaf leaders. We had met and decided to create something that is accessible for all, something to bring more exposure and understanding to deaf people and to build advocacy. A few of us met together and established a nonprofit organization called the Vancouver Association of the Deaf. This began collaboration with several individuals and groups of deaf leaders. Deaf organizations, along with the hearing community's support, had begun to collaborate and work together. Shortly after this collaboration, I was asked to be on the board of the Southwest Center for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing, being a part of a team determined to bring deaf leaders opportunities in the hearing world. Doors open for leadership, collaboration, education, communication amongst the deaf and hearing worlds. With both organizations, my role was the event director and the liaison. We created events that brought deaf and hearing from all over Oregon, Washington, California, Arizona, New Mexico, and Idaho. The projects I chaired brought value and were the stepping stones to an entire community that showed no fear to communicate and embrace deaf people. The gap between deaf and hearing was lessened and the bridge was formed. Project included deaf, ASL skilled, CODAs, interpreters, deaf ed teachers, and hearing members, all in a full signing environment. The deaf inviting the hearing into their world. It brought down the walls and allowed the hearing world to view the deaf as equals. We were the same, except the deaf couldn't hear. Several events, I invited local deaf business vendors, deaf nonprofits, and local resources for the deaf, each a benefit to the deaf and served as an educational purpose for the hearing. Starting in 2005, popular annual events I chaired began. Deaf sporting events such as volleyball, softball, dragon boat racing, and basketball tournaments. Deaf leaders and coaches and players collaborated with ASL fluent hearing volunteers. We planned deaf and hearing socials such as the annual Halloween Bash, hosted at a bar where I worked as a server, and we had several workers who could sign. Deaf and hearing members came for fun while we did Halloween contests, games, and activities for everyone. For the children, we host the annual Deaf Families Pumpkin Patch Fun. Families experience wagon rides to the pumpkin patch, pumpkin launching, face painting, hot cocoa, and a deaf and hearing signing social. I organize a county-wide toy drive supported by our local ASL and deaf organizations as well as educational programs. And we receive over 100 gifts to provide free gifts to deaf children and their families. In a hearing world, deaf children and deaf parents don't have the access of communication with Santa. So, how does a deaf child communicate with Santa? By attending our annual Deaf Kids Holiday Party. We have a signing Santa, elves, snowmen, and staff for all deaf children, parents, and their families. Volunteers fluent in ASL help in our craft booths, perform ASL holiday skits and songs, enjoy a holiday meal, and more. Each event continues to thrive and is appreciated by many. Being a performer, I joined the ASL comedy troupe, also known as ACT, a nearly full deaf comedy cast. I was with them for a fun-filled 7 shows. I helped write and choreograph several scenes and stories that we brought to life in ASL, and we used interpreters for the signing impaired. Through comedy, our show consisted of stories of the day-to-day life and struggles of a deaf person. Through comedy also, we taught the hearing deaf culture, how to interact with deaf people, and some signs and the deaf way of life. 100% of our proceeds went to various deaf nonprofit organizations nationwide. While all this work is beginning to help fill the gap between two worlds, I decided to continue my education and pursue my master's in education, as well as receive my National Board's teaching certificate. All the while, I was a single mother. For over 15 years, I taught American Sign Language interpreting to hearing, elementary, middle, high school, and college students. While teaching ASL and deaf culture to hearing students, I directed and created a local favorite competition, a musical event in ASL using deaf judges called Signing Idol. This became so popular, I wanted to add a show I called Signin' Out. With deaf world aspects, we added songs, stories, skits, poetry, and deaf art. All students played a part of this, including those with special needs. These annual events were showcased to over 800 deaf and hearing members, and to date, over 3,500 hearing students has participated in this annual event. Each event was not only entertaining, it also taught the hearing about deaf cultural norms, values, and language. Students countywide wanted to participate, so I created the Clark County So You Think You Can Sign ASL competition. In the past 10 years, thousands of kids has participated, and it continues to gain more attention throughout our community and state. Each event opened the doors and exposure to deaf and educating hearing on equality, access, public awareness, leadership, and collaboration. With awareness and our community, we are building that bridge. With all this exposure, hearing members are actively participating and advocating for the deaf. With all the success of the work that I've played a key role in, I only wish I could do the same for the deaf people of Guam. Other than my parents, I owe many thanks to the deaf community, especially the deaf community on Guam. It gave me a unique experience I didn't value until I got older. It's the deaf people and culture of Guam that's helped shape me into who I am today. It's my turn to give back, the calling for me to go back to my homeland and find ways to empower the deaf and build the bridge on Guam. The idea was for me to produce a documentary that can shine light and bring stories to a hearing world, not just for Guam, but throughout the Pacific. I see how Guam can be a leader and reach out to all. The documentary is called Guam Deaf, Exposed and Empowered. This will expose the deaf, educate our island, and bring leadership and collaboration. The end result will empower the deaf on Guam, and they will all experience a social change. The work that I'm doing has received attention, and in result and coincidentally, I am honored to be selected to be a diaspora delegate to represent Guam at the 2016 Festival of Pacific Arts, also known as FESPAC, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that happens to be hosted on Guam. I take great pride and honor to accept this responsibility to teach What's the Deaf World, breaking down walls not just on Guam, but over 27 different countries. By bringing this awareness, the future of Guam and the Pacific's deaf community is bright, and by us planting the seed, it will close the gap between deaf and hearing. Challenged and enriched with all my life experiences and skills, I truly owe all my thanks to my parents. Being a CODA isn't always easy, but it's the cards I was dealt with and something I'm not ashamed of. To date, I remain an interpreter, teacher, committee board member, and owner of my dance production. I will continue to teach and continue to build the bridge between deaf and hearing worlds. Thank you, and Sizu Usmasi for watching and playing a part of this bridge between two worlds.